Welcome back, guys. Here at the desk, well, there's some awesome arena matches so far, but now we're going to take a short break, do some dev talk with Brian Holinka. Thanks for being here, man. This is exciting.
Jackson, it's been an awesome day so far. Thank you for being here. I think your addition to this has been tremendous. The energy you're bringing, and we can see you're having a really fun time. And I think the players appreciate that when they're watching it. So thanks for that. Love having you.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, these have been some incredible matches so far, but they're not the only matches that we've been seeing televised on Twitch. We've seen a lot of just in general, like more tournaments being held by players. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's super exciting, right? We, didn't know how things would go when we added the spectate game match feature in Warlords of Draenor. We weren't sure, hey, are people going to use this? Is it kind of a waste of effort? But we're, super pleased to see that it's reaped tremendous rewards. Obviously, the organizations like GCD TV ran 20 tournaments every week over the past year. That's tremendous, and I think we're seeing the results of not only just the community engagement in the game right now, but also from the players themselves. A lot of up-and-comers who got 20 weeks worth of tournament PvP play are coming up and picking off some pretty big names. So I think that has been a really awesome thing for the game and for our community. And we're also seeing not only that, but we're seeing like other regions like LATAM, really stepping it up and seeing Nieves and Vitor going Falenciu every time there's a big kill. It's awesome to see that type of action and enthusiasm for Arena.
Great. So we know the spectate feature was something that you liked. In general, how do you feel about Warlords PvP? What are some things that you did like? Obviously spectate. What are some things that you maybe didn't like as much?
Well, certainly there's some things we really were happy with. We were happy with the addition of skirmishes. It gave the players who didn't have their arena teammates on, the opportunity to engage in some arena gameplay, and that was pretty cool. People queue up for skirmishes while leveling, while gearing up, and I think that's a really fun experience, so I'm really happy with that. We're really happy with the way strongboxes worked out in Battlegrounds. The ability for people to get different gear in a more unpredictable way was a pretty cool feature, so we're happy with that. And obviously the group finder was a great addition. It allowed people who are looking for teammates in either arenas or rated battlegrounds to participate there, and that was super cool. On the other end, obviously we feel like Ashran fell short of where we would have liked to have seen it go, and where we think our players wanted to see it go. During the kind of ramp up and PR period for Warlords, we saw a lot of people very excited about this idea of a world PvP zone that you kind of free flow into and compete and move around the whole large area and engage in really large epic battles. And we thought that was like a cool idea. So the fact that the response from players was so strong, we were excited. Obviously, we didn't execute on the idea. We wish we had. We've tried over the course of the expansion to make changes based on not only player behavior, but also player feedback. And we've made mistakes along the way. We've done things like in an effort to make rewards and Ashran feel special, put some exclusive rewards in there, and there was just a lot of negative feedback to that. So we think actually right now, the state that Ashran's in, it can actually be fun for a lot of people who are really interested in that type of experience. And obviously, we tried to make it so that the people who don't want to be in there don't have to be in there. I think if we had maybe executed to this degree at the beginning of the expansion, it wouldn't be a dirty word. But certainly, all I can say is we've learned a tremendous amount from the experience about rewards and driving players to fight each other. And we hope that the next time we try something like this, we can execute better.
Fair enough. So for the record, I thought strong boxes were cool. Really encouraged me to do BGs. I enjoy BGs anyway. A lot of fun. Being able to play with members of my live stream, just group finder them in, that was awesome. And you know, you can't hate Ashran too much when you got a good old Captain Jackson Bajiri in there helping you out.
Certainly.
So speaking of gear a little bit,
Yeah.
how do you feel that gear worked in this expansion, specifically with the item levels?
Yeah, you know, one of our goals in Mists of Pandaria and in Warlords of Draenor was to kind of make sure that we kept pace with where PvE gear has gone, and still ensure that PvP gear offers the best gear alternatives in World PvP. What's challenging there is if you think back to Burning Crusade, right? You had maybe just one raid tier, and then you had raiding, you had dungeons and then like a raid tier, and then you had battlegrounds and arena. So you had conquest gear. So you kind of had 2 tiers on both of them, and you know the goals are very different for gear in PvP and PvE. In PvE, every time you increase the difficulty or increase a tier, you want it to have a very meaningful increase in power, and you want players to feel that. In PvP, we kind of want to make sure that gap doesn't get too big. So you get gear and can feel it, but it's not so much that not having gear becomes kind of an impediment for people to participate. So we, did the dual item level, and I think it worked, but it was pretty ugly. Players had two item levels on their gear. Sometimes they increased their eye level suddenly in rated combat. They couldn't really see their stats. There was this invisible eye level ceiling that PvE gear couldn't go above. And players who were not necessarily full-time PvP players, they still felt compelled to go get that other gear to even participate in PvP. So while we think the system is cool, we feel like it still kind of fell short in a lot of ways.
So, sort of tail end of
Sure.
that, we've heard a lot from Gamescom that there won't be PvP gear anymore.
Yeah.
So.
What's that mean? Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that when we say PvP gear, we mean gear with resilience, or gear with PvP power, or gear with dual item level. We mean gear that is specifically made for PvP, and that's something we want to get away from. We don't want people to feel like, oh, I've got to have the PvP gear in order to participate in PvP. So really what we're saying there is gear. Everybody kind of can have the same gear. They can have PvE gear, they can have PvP gear. It's all the same thing, it's all the same pool. What's super cool about this idea is kind of where we're going with PvP. We've talked a lot about trying to close that gear gap so that people can be more competitive. And really what we've kind of come to the solution is that we want to reduce that gap. We want gear to still be gear, but in PvP we want that gear to mean a lot less. Okay. So it's super exciting, not only for that goal, but for what else it does is, in Legion, when you enter a battleground or an arena, we're going to be setting all of your stats, not from your gear, but based on your specialization. So the PvP team is going to be able to say, oh, for every specialization, what are their stats? And so your gear, your eye level will matter in a way I'll talk about later, but the stats are all going to come from a specific template. So what that means is, if one specialization is maybe not doing enough damage in PvP, we can increase their intellect or their strength or their agility in PvP. If we feel like mana regeneration is tuned too highly for arena gameplay or RBG gameplay, we can reduce people's regen. If we find out that one secondary stat can be stacked too much and players, and that synergizes too well with one of their talents, we can just reduce the amount of mastery they get. So this gives us tremendous tuning power for PvP that doesn't affect PvE in a tremendous way, probably unprecedented thus far in World of Warcraft. And so I think it's really going to be maybe the biggest change to WoW PvP since we actually introduced arenas. That coupled with PvP talents, allowing us to bring in PvP-specific mechanics and ideas that make sense for PvP but not the rest of the game, that's really probably going to allow us to do things with class balance, with arena balance that we've never been able to do before.
At the risk of being an impartial interviewer, that I think is a change that a lot of players in the PvP community are going to rejoice about. That is amazing. So, you did touch on right there at the tail end, PvP talents. Can you tell us more about why you're going that direction?
Yeah, so when we kind of said, let's reduce gear in PvP, that kind of, if gear is the progression system that we have in PvP right now. You go out, you get conquest points, you get honor points, and then you go purchase the gear, and that's it. Once a lot of players, and we've seen this, once they get their full set of gear, they're done. They don't feel like playing the game anymore. Sure, there are tons of people, probably a lot watching this stream right now, who can continue to push rating, and that's really their progression, and gearing is kind of just like the thing, the bump in the road to what they really care about. But for a lot of players, that's not the case. And so what we had was this system that really created a big power gap. You know, like a guy could, like for instance, our current season, you had a guy who was in 690s, and he's fighting a guy who's in 730s. That is a 40% increase in power, not just damage, but also in health pool. And even as much as we've done with dual item level to shrink that gap, it's still too great. So we wanted to get away from that, but we still wanted to have meaningful progression. Like, we wanted players to be able to go do battlegrounds, arenas, skirmishes, rated battlegrounds, and feel like they were making progress towards some type of goal. But along that way, it's really important to have very compelling rewards. And so that's where the PvP talents came up. We said, okay, well, what if every few levels we were giving players, these talents to kind of take the place of what used to come from gear. We used to be able to enchant gear, used to be able to gem your gear, used to be, select trinkets. And those were customization options you were making. But in Legion, we're not going to have trinkets active in PvP. We're not going to have set bonuses active in PvP. We're not going to have enchants active in PvP. All of that kind of stuff is going to come from the PvP talent system. What's really cool about that is a couple of things. One, with all those things, enchants, trinkets, set bonuses, they often are kind of stacking player power. So when all these things line up at once, players do 2 to 3 times as much damage as they normally do, and it creates this wet noodle effect where, like, oh, if all that stuff's not up, I'm not doing much damage, but when it is up, I'm doing crazy damage. So taking that stuff out, I think, will make sustained damage a bigger part of PvP in Legion, but also it really enforces why the PvP talents are so cool and what customization that they bring.
Okay, so the prestige system does sound really, really neat, and we talked about PvP talents. So what was the rationale behind losing all your PvP talents when you do decide to prestige? Yeah,
so as we discussed at Gamescom, once players reach match level 50, they can reset their honor level and increase their prestige level. And every time you do that leveling process from 1 to 50, you get a prestige reward, which is something cosmetic, like a new artifact weapon look, a new mount, or something like that. We decided, it was important to have a cost to that prestige. If we just said, okay, you hit 50, now go to 100, but there's no rewards along the way, it's a pretty empty kind of experience. So we wanted to be like, oh, that guy, he has that, prestige 4 level Ashbringer. He really did something pretty cool and pretty epic. And so giving up those prestige talents, we think is important. But at the same time, because we talk about how the PvP talents, they do offer some power, we want to make sure that players are kind of up to speed and able to compete at a pretty quick level. So as you saw in the Gamescom presentation, there are 6 rows of PvP talents, and players unlock one of those PvP talents as an option as they go from 1 to 50. We want to make sure that by level 10, so like 20% of your way through the whole experience, you've got an option in every row. So technically you're at full power. You might not arguably have the one you want, but you really are in a good position. A good position.
Awesome. So in that PvP talents preview, we saw Gladiators Medallion in that tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what does that mean for the human racial?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we're not going to have trinkets active in PvP, so that means we needed, the CC Break trinket has become a pretty kind of fundamental mechanic in PvP in the past years, so we needed a way to kind of continue that. So we kind of took that ability and we put it in the first row, so everybody gets it right away, and then we'll have some other options in that row that are kind of, it's arguable whether they'll be things that shift the meta, but it could just be things that some players prefer. People who do rated battlegrounds or random battlegrounds or skirmishes and don't want to have the CC break trinket. What if there was just passive reduction of all CC? Like what if you were just in CC 20% less? That is actually attractive to a lot of people who hate the amount of crowd control in the game. So we think that's a really cool idea that we can go with there. As for where this puts the human racial, we haven't really decided yet. It's possible that we don't change it and we offer a different alternative option in that spot for humans. It's also possible that that racial plus the other options is too good. So there's a lot for us to think about there, but certainly it's something we have to examine.
Okay, just going back to gear once again. So we will still be getting gear from PvP somehow, or will we? One of the questions is, if there's not PvP specific gear, are we as PvPers going to have to do, N tier rating to get the best gear for PvP, or how are we going to acquire gear?
Yeah, sure. We saw that as a big concern from people over the last week. One of the big things to stress is the way that this system works is the gear, as you get greater gear, we kind of increase your stats a little bit. But there's a scaling to that. So it might be, let's take our current example of our current season where you have a player who's fresh out of gear, we scale them up to 690, a player who's 730, that's like a 40% difference. So our new system might be something like, your stats don't increase above 690. Your stats, everything below 690, your stats don't go up or down. So everybody's below 690, they're all kind of on equal footing. For every eye level that your character is, like maybe every 5 eye levels above 690, we increase your stats by 1%. So a guy who is 730s, he's got an 8% increase in stats compared to you. So rather than a 40% increase in stats, it's a lot smaller because we feel like it's meaningful and important that in World of Warcraft, a role-playing game, that players acquire gear, they become stronger. But in PvP, we don't want it to get so out of control. And so we think this system lets everybody have an equal playing field, but wherever they acquire gear, they can come in and maybe be stronger. Now, one of our values is also that we've tried to make in Mists of Pandaria and tried to make here in Warlords of Draenor, is to try and make PvP gear an avenue where you can get the best PvP gear. So as a result, we have systems and we have plans to ensure that players can get great gear from PvP, but it may not be as easy as it is today. Since gear is gear, players will try and have access in ways that we're not really ready to talk about, but perhaps it's a little easier for a higher rated player to get a bit better gear than it is for a player who just kind of queues up 10 rated games a week. But we think because we've kind of shrunk the delta, that sure, yeah, the guy who's super serious about PvP and really cares about his rating, he's going to push hard to get that best gear and improve. But for everybody else, the whole implementation will just be a whole lot simpler. Okay,
so everything we've covered today is extremely exciting. It shows a huge commitment to PvP from the team, which is great to hear. Given our situation here, given where we are today, how do you think this affects WoW as an esport, and what is your vision for WoW as an esport in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously esports is a tremendous community engagement event for us. Everybody's out there, they're in Twitch chats, spamming, chuck free my energy, and also lots of colorful stuff about their favorite PvP designer. It's a great time for players just of any game to be able to rally about the games that they love to play. And so we think that's what we want WoW Esports to be. We want to empower the people who are out there who want to create events for WoW to be able to do it. Spectator mode was a really cool step towards that. What are some other things that we can do to bring that about? And there are obviously organizations that have shown things like MLG, ESL, they've shown interest in WoW. ESL ran a tournament this morning, so there's tremendous interest there, and it's great to see that we are creating an opportunity for our players to kind of get together about something they love. And for us, that's what it's about. It's about that community. It's like seeing that, hashtag Wow Copa America, that excitement down there, and seeing that LATAM community get together, seeing, the 25,000 people plus in watching this broadcast. There's a lot of people very interested in where we're going. And I think that's super cool. I think it's great. And as a result, I think it makes the community is making the experience better. When you look at our 4-player rosters change this year, that really largely came from the community. That came from like the GCD TV folks and other tournament organizers who have been trying different things. People who've tried pick band systems, whatever. They're awesome to see people trying out those ideas and seeing if they work. And as a result, I think this tournament is one of the best ones we've ever had. We're seeing a lot of comp diversity. We're seeing interesting comp mirrors. We're seeing different players, and we're seeing counter comping. There's a lot more interesting things going on during a WoW Arena tournament than ever before. So that's what we want to do. Our community is the ones who make this game great. We want to empower them to keep making it better, and that's really where I see this going.
This is certainly the best WoW tournament that I've ever hosted. I can say that with certainty.
Wow, yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for this information. We covered a little bit about WoD, and definitely had some very, very exciting information moving into WoW Legion. But we are going to take a short break. This has been Brian Holinka, lead PvP designer. Like I said, we are going to take a short break, and we'll get right back to the games. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you.